Haliburton's got the ball. Haliburton rises up. And there's a whistle. Oh, my goodness. Tyrese Haliburton hits a three and is fouled.
You have got to be kidding me.
McConnell underneath the basket. Looking. Toppin in the corner for three.
Oh, yeah! Yeah! OB!
Pacers have it, a chance to tie.
Yeah, Nembhard
Hits the three. Nembhard gives Indiana the lead.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Pacers Fever Show, your go-to spot for all things blue and gold. I'm Logan, and today we're diving into the Game 3 loss in Milwaukee. I'll break down what went wrong, what it means for the series going forward, and some key takeaways from that game. I'll also be previewing Game 4, talking about the key adjustments both the Pacers and the Bucks need to make. We'll also lay out the keys for Game 4 as the Pacers look to take a lead 3-1 back to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And I'll give you my 5 Game 4 predictions. We've got plenty to get into, so let's get the show on the road. Number 4, Pacers versus the number 5 Bucks. Game 3 Friday, April 25th, the Pacers lose that game 117-101, and they are now up in the series 2-1 as Game 4 will be played tonight, Sunday, April 27th at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT. Game 5 was announced as well, as they will head back to Gainbridge Fieldhouse no matter what the result is tonight, and that game will be on Tuesday, April 29th, Milwaukee at Indiana at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on NBA TV. And then if Game 6 is necessary, it will be Friday, May 2nd, time to be determined in Milwaukee. And then Game 7 would be Sunday, May 4th, if necessary, Milwaukee at Indiana. And again, that time will be determined based on TV scheduling and what the rest of the series look like across the league. Game 4 preview show is here, so we'll talk about that at the end of this episode. But let's quickly go through the Game 3 recap, talk a little bit about the headlines, what went wrong. I was not able to record on Saturday, so we're doing this on Sunday. We'll do a quick recap of what happened in Game 3. There's not a ton to talk about that was positive for the Pacers in this one, but I do think that there are some takeaways that we can get from this game that should give us some hope going into Game 4. And I think, just sinking into what really was going wrong for the Pacers and looking at and reading different things, I think they're adjustments that are easy to make. I think we just have to make them. So let's get into it. Headline Game 3. Bucks get a huge game from Gary Trent Jr. Trent scored 37 points on 11 of 16 from the field, 68.8%, 9 for 12 from the three-point line, 85.7%. Takes the place of Taurean Prince in the starting lineup, and he played 34 minutes. Trent tied a franchise playoff record with 9 3-pointers in the game, and that matches Ray Allen's performance where he hit 9 3-pointers in a playoff game for the Bucks, Game 6 of the 2001 Eastern Conference Finals against the 76ers. Giannis was great again, as he always is against the Pacers. He just has their number. They don't really have an answer for him, and we'll talk about what that means going forward in this series. 37 points, 14 of 19 from the field, a 73% clip, 9 for 10 from the free throw line, which was a huge difference from the games prior. Also had 12 boards, 6 assists. And in the series, Giannis is averaging 35.7 points per game, 14 rebounds, 4.7 assists, 1 block, and 4.7 turnovers in 36 minutes. And that's been the key for the Bucks to keep them somewhat close to the Pacers in Game 2. And in Game 3, that was a big difference as he was had a co-leading scorer in Gary Trent Jr. Nesmith and Pascal Siakam tried to carry the Pacers to a 3-0 lead. Everyone else struggled at times, and for most of the game, a lot of these guys did not show up. A very poor shooting night from a couple of key players in the Pacers rotation, so we'll get into that as well. Can't get out and run when they are making field goals. So the Pacers had a really difficult time stopping the Bucks defensively in the second half, because in the first half, we'll go through that first. In the first half, the Pacers had a really good rhythm once we started to get towards the end of the second quarter. I didn't feel like they were hitting their shots, but we started to see them edge away from the Bucks. They got up to a 10-point lead. It was tied after the first quarter, 10-point lead heading into halftime. You felt pretty good as a Pacer fan because the offense finally started to look like it was showing signs of life. They weren't really hitting their open 3-point shots, but they were getting points and really struggling. You felt like, well, if we just shoot the ball better in the second half, this could be a blowout. I really did feel that we were on that edge of like, we were not playing well, but if we started to play better, this could easily balloon into a 20-point lead. And then that would have been the Bucks dead in water. I thought the Bucks were dead in water when we were up 10 and they didn't really have an answer for the Pacers, even though they were not shooting very well. I thought that the Pacers were going to be able to extend that lead. But once the third quarter started, that quickly faded, and it felt like two different games just by the way the Pacers played in the third quarter. The Bucks really needed a lift from someone. And in game two, it was Bobby Portis Jr. They were very close to getting back into that game and stealing it. They did get back to the game. They almost stole it, is what they were getting close to getting. But you kind of looked at this Bucks team and went, all right, so if Bobby Portis is going to have his game then, I think as a Pacer fan, you felt at home the role players were going to be better, but I don't think you expected this version of Gary Trent Jr. to show up. And in the third quarter, the Pacers just completely lost him. Different assignments on Giannis, I think, impacts the ability of the Pacers to get comfortable and find their man in transition and defensively. Bucks play a lot of half court, move the ball around, get Giannis going to the basket, and then he distributes, and then they kind of kick to an extra man every once in a while. So it's a lot of ISO ball that turns into some really good shots just because Giannis creates so much of a distraction for a defense because they have to send 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 at times guys to try to stop him from getting to the rim. The Pacers have been very good about building that wall in and around Giannis and at least limiting him to that 30-point range, which they've been successful in beating the Bucks doing that. But it's always a closer game than it should be just because they really just don't have an answer where they could possibly keep Giannis to like a 25, 28-point game. He's always going to get around 35, and just those extra 7 to 8 points is going to make this game a lot closer because we can continue to talk about it, but this Bucks roster is not as talented as the Pacers roster, straight up. I think if you look at the best, I'll extend it to now 6 because Damian Lillard, but Damian Lillard's not playing like a top 5 player right now in this series. So I might not even have to do that right now to extend it. But Dame historically has always been a top player. I would say that the Bucks have 2 of the best 6 players on the court when Dame is going. But the way that Lillard's playing right now, I can't even say that. I would say that the Pacers have the best, 4 or 5 players on the court beside Giannis. So it really depends on what the Pacers can do off the ball and stopping the Bucks and keeping Giannis at bay somewhat, not allowing him to get 40 or 50 points. But the Pacers, I mean, it really did. I would say I didn't feel the offense was rolling, but I did feel like for an extended period of time in the second quarter, I felt like, okay, the Pacers are going to start to get away from the Bucks just because the Bucks could not figure out anything offensively. They just couldn't. They weren't shooting the ball well. We weren't shooting the ball well. I think at one point teams were like 3 of 24 from the 3-point line, and it shows just how much the Bucks rely on 3-point shooting. But the Pacers got sucked into this. Let's just fire from deep as well, and they were matching the Bucks miss for miss from the 3-point line. And I'm talking about the Bucks at least had more contested shots. The Pacers had a ton of open shots. I was listening to Setting the Pace. Alex Golden was talking about the fact that he went back and watched this game, and there were at least 18 times where the Pacers had wide open great looks, and they missed a ton of those. So it goes to show you just how important shooting from outside can be. If you're cold, it eliminates the worry and eliminates some of the pressure that you can put on defenses in this league. And the Bucks do not defend well, and we've seen that throughout the series. Game 1 and Game 2, the Pacers got everything that they could possibly want offensively, and that was not the case in the third quarter for the Pacers. Outside of that, the first, second, and fourth quarters, I felt like the Pacers were getting what they wanted. They were just missing shots. So let's talk about all of that, and we'll discuss some of the struggles, and I think some of the guys that factored into that struggle. The number one person that obviously I think people are going to point at is Tyrese Haliburton. So, of course, he's going back to Milwaukee. He's from that area, and he he's got the pressure of being from that area. There's people in that building that are very close to Tyrese, and then everybody else hates him. And the overrated chants were raining down as soon as he touched the ball. He got booed every time he would touch the ball. It was just a hostile environment, and Tyrese is usually really good in those environments. But for some reason tonight, he just in this series, he's just not been able to find his shot. And I've heard a lot of people talking about this, especially Bucks fans or Bucks podcasts, and then in national media as well. Tyrese, they'll say, is not a great shooter. I would argue that he's not one of the greatest shooters, but he is a great shooter. I don't know where that came from. And I know people are like, well, make him take shots. He does like to take shots. He's a high percentage, very efficient, very effective 3-point shooter. They were like, he likes to catch the ball and shoot. He's not a catch and shoot kind of guy. I don't know what games they've watched, but he's constantly dribbling into his shot with that step back 3-point shot that he really likes to take. So I don't know really where all of that discussion's coming from. I don't know. I do know where it's coming from. It's national media and other podcasts and other coverages not watching the Pacers play. They don't understand how the Pacers play. They know who Pascal Siakam is. They know Tyrese Haliburton is all-star candidate worthy, all NBA team candidate. But I don't think they understand how he plays and how he's most effective, which is why we hear all that overrated stuff. And that was a poll that was done by 90% of his, or 90 players, or 90 of his peers. And a lot of that comes from just not understanding basketball. I think the people voting don't understand the importance of a shot creator. The amount of open shots that he gets his teammates is far better than what a lot of these guys can do on all these teams. I mean, you could argue that he's a plus 10 or 12 point per game kind of guy. You can tally that into his points per game just by how open he makes his teammates. And you could maybe even argue more where he's around a 30 mark at points just because of the assists that he contributes. And even I think what really hurts Tyrese is that we don't get the hockey assist where you get the ball to a guy and he gets the ball to a guy and he scores. So I think if you're doing hockey assist, I mean, Tyrese Haliburton has to be one of the most impactful players on anybody's roster just because of how good he is. We'll talk about what the Bucks did to eliminate him and have been doing to eliminate Tyrese. And I think it's something that other teams will do as well. And I think he is young, so he's still trying to figure out, how do I navigate this? How do I break free of what they're trying to do in the game plan in which they're trying to incorporate around me and make my teammates better, but also make myself better? And honestly, I think the biggest thing that I would, knock Ty about is that I do believe there's times where he settles and, early in the game, teams are allowing him to get to the rim. And as the game goes on, they start to tighten up and tighten up and tighten up more on the defensive side. And we've seen the numbers that when Ty does not shoot well to begin the game, he averages, I think, like 5 points less than he normally would. And that's a big drop off, especially when you're in close games. This game wasn't close after the third quarter, but it goes to show you just how important it is to get Tyrese going. And the struggles in the playoffs so far have been apparent because he's not hitting shots. But I wouldn't say that Tyrese is playing poorly. He's playing well. He's just not been an all-star level or all NBA player type level that we'd seen over the last couple of months, just because he's not really threatening anybody offensively. I mean, he's not shooting a good percentage. He's not hitting his shots. He's not getting to the rim. He's settling for quite a bit. He's turned the ball over a couple more times than he typically does. And that's all just been key. And he talked about this post game too in game 3. They interviewed him and he said that this is all on me. I mean, I'm the engine that makes this offense go. And we've seen what it looks like without Tyrese. And I think that's something that we can address later on in the offseason, or we'll address as time goes on and they play more defensive-minded teams. It's scary, and we can talk about it in this episode too, just because of how up and down the bench has been this year. Whereas last year they were such a consistent rock, and putting those players in last year, it was just night and day difference to what they are this year. And that's impacted, I think, what the effectiveness that Ty has too, because the offense is almost completely reliant upon he and Pascal doing something. So we'll maybe talk about what is needed later on in the offseason as far as depth is concerned. But I think you're starting to see it's more apparent that the Pacers might need to start looking at another ball handler that can come in, because there's just been so many struggles from TJ McConnell, and that'll be something we talk about after we talk about this next person, who is Miles Turner. I think Miles has struggled on the road at times. I think he gets a little bit caught up in the moment, and when he's not shooting well, then it's really difficult to play him against a team that often deploys a small lineup now, because they'll eliminate Brook Lopez's minutes more and more as the series goes on, because he's just unplayable against the Pacers. They've started Brook. I would not be shocked by, maybe tonight or game 5, you see Brook completely eliminated from at least the starting rotation, where you see more Bobby. And maybe that's the move that's made tonight or tomorrow, to put Bobby in those minutes, and then when they play on Tuesday, you'll see more Bobby Portis starting, or Bobby Portis getting closer to those minutes that Giannis and Gary Trent are getting, just because there's just no confidence, I think, in what Brook Lopez has done in this series. And when he's not hitting shots, he's completely useless for this Bucks team. He just doesn't do anything that is a positive, where I think in years past he had done things that have added to his value. But Miles has got to take advantage of those smaller lineups sometimes too, because while he has not been great against, or while he's been great against Brook, he tends to struggle whenever teams put a smaller guy on him. And I don't know if it's because they're quicker to get out on his 3-point shot, and he's not really a great ball handler. So he gets looks like he gets kind of nervous or a little anxious, or tries to get going too fast, and his handle's not great, and he ends up kind of just driving towards the basket and a lot of times into trouble. And then he forces shots, and sometimes he gets fouled. Like, he got an early foul on Giannis this way, where he just took off towards the basket because Giannis overcommits, and he gets Giannis in a bad position and almost dunks it on him. But there's other times too where Miles, just when he can't shoot those 3-point shots, it's hard for him to get going in the offense, just because it's difficult to really get into the flow and hit those shots where the bigs drop off of him and he's open for 3 at the top of the key. So I don't know. I think the Pacers have a lot to talk about as far as, what that looks like for Miles going forward, and some of the matchups that he gets, because there are times in the smaller lines where he's not a post player, but there's times where Miles can do a good job of getting you 2 to 6 points by going down low and taking a smaller guy into the paint off the dribble as well. So we'll see what Miles does, but I don't expect him to be, because this was probably, and a lot of the media said this, where this might have been his worst playoff performance. And I'm starting to think as well in that same vein, where I think that he was not as good as he had been in other playoff games, and probably was one of his worst performances. And a lot of it has to do with just him not hitting shots. That's so key for him to hit hit a 3, and to force the defense to fly out on him, because when they do, it causes problems, and Tyrese can get to the rim easier because they overcommit on the pick, or the pick and roll becomes more effective because they're worried about Turner picking and popping from 3. So he just creates more defensively for different teams. But in this game, he wasn't hitting shots, so they weren't really worried about what he was doing. Bench was awful. So this, again, I think going into the playoffs, this was one of the biggest concerns I think I had for the Pacers, is just the inconsistency of the bench play this year. And in game 1 and game 2, I felt like TJ McConnell played really well, or good enough to where it was a different TJ than what we'd been seeing in the regular season, because I do feel like TJ did not have as good of a season as he did last year. And Obi Toppin hasn't been as good as he had been, because he was on fire heading into the postseason. I just don't feel like he's been that effective, or really that into the game. Like, there's a lot of times when Toppin's been out there in the last 3 games where you just don't really notice he's out there, because he's not really impacting the game too much, and he usually does. And I think that's something that the Pacers will look at to get somebody else more involved in the rotations, whether that be, more minutes of Ben together with the starters, or I mean, we saw Ben Shepherd in this one, which was kind of a head scratcher because of the lack of playing time that he's gotten lately. And I know that he's had the toe injury, and maybe that was impacting him a lot more. And maybe more of the minutes were lost to Jarris Walker because he just wasn't healthy enough and he wasn't hitting his shots. I mean, you combine all of that, that's a factor definitely of him not playing well. But also, he might have been dealing with that toe injury for a month or so, and we just didn't know. And that was something that was impacting his play because the first shot that Ben got in this one, he hits. It's a three. So you did lose Jarris Walker, and I think Jarris Walker is easily a more offensive-minded person and threat, and I think that could play into the Bucks' favor is seeing more Ben Shepherd. While Ben is good defensively, he's not a big guard. He is undersized, and while it can be effective against the Bucks because they don't really have a huge wing besides Kuzma, who's really going to take advantage of him. But even then, Kuzma's not taking advantage of anyone. So I just don't know what you do with this bench. Like I don't. And Benedict Mathurin has his really good moments, and then there's stretches where it's not what you need out of Ben to really take you to the next level. I'd love to see a Ben 20-point game, but I'm starting to think that that might be years down the road. I don't know if it's because it's his first playoff experience or if and I know his minutes have started to dwindle a little bit. I think it was, I forget who tweeted it, but I think it was like 16 or something minute. Hold on, let me check. Actually got the stats pulled up. So the minutes have declined for Ben in the playoff games. Carlisle's not playing as much in each game they've gone down. So in game 1, he plays 25 minutes. In game 2, he only played 17 minutes. And I believe in this game, he only played 13 in game 3. Game 3, 13 minutes, 42 seconds. So his minutes have been sliced quite a bit. And Ben Shepherd played more minutes. And I know a lot of that had to do with, runtime, garbage time. And Ben can spell different people. Whereas I think Mathurin, typically, he'll spell Neesmith. There's not a whole lot of him spelling Nemhard just because defensively it doesn't really match up. But yeah, it's a really, and people will be like, well, what's Rick doing? Why isn't he playing Ben more? But Ben's not really changing the game. I mean, in this game, he really did have a good quarter, but there's not been many of those where, it looks like he's going to score more than 14 points a game. Like he just seems to be right at that level, and there's not much elevated. He doesn't really take advantage of people that he should at times. I think he's a little bit more hesitant, and I know part of that's the system and what the Pacers preach is moving the basketball, getting open shots by passing the ball, not dribbling. But in the playoffs, that's what we've really missed is having somebody that's that guy that can just, when you are struggling, like the third quarter when we were struggling, well, what the Pacers really could have used then was a guy that was really good in ISO because you've got a bench unit that, and Ben's out there in the third. You've got a bench unit that really struggles to score at times. And when TJ McConnell's not going, they really look awful because it becomes like the Obi Toppin and TJ show. And TJ tries to force too much, I think. And then, Toppin's kind of the one offensive option. And then Benedict Mathurin gets the ball and then he's dribbling a ton and and TJ's dribbling a ton. And then Pascal is usually with that unit. So he's ball dominant. So it just, I don't know. I really, that's one thing I think the Pacers are going to really have to try to figure out is how do we get more production out of our bench? Because that was such a huge thing last year in the playoffs. I still think that the way it's currently constructed, I don't think the Pacers are really able to go to an 8-person rotation as much as that's usually needed in the playoffs. I still would be more reliant upon putting Jarris Walker out there. And I know Ben adds a different defensive intensity than Jarris does. And that's not saying that Ben's a better defensive player than Jarris. I think there's just times where Ben's way more aggressive and has been there and has been in these situations, is more mature, is more is stronger to a degree. And I would say, people go, well, Jarris is stronger than Ben. But I think the way he plays and the intensity in which he plays with, he creates more of a strength issue for people. Whereas Jarris is much more of like he kind of plays off you on the ball. He's not really somebody that's going to get too physical with you, and he will be somebody that uses his length to try to poke it away and cause issues. Whereas Ben's more of get in your face and hound you like Nemhard is. So you get more of a defensive intensity with Ben. And I think that's why Rick goes to him. He's just more polished. Whereas Jarris is tremendously gifted and talented. But there are the moments where you do have some issues with Jarris and some of the decisions he's making. But he's been great the last month and a half, 2 months. I feel like Jarris has really stepped up and deserves some minutes. And I'm just, people last year complained about, playing 9 to 10 people in the playoffs. But I just don't see enough from that bench unit to where I can consistently say, oh, we can just shrink this down to TJ, Obi, and Ben off the bench. Ben Mathurin. I think you got to go to a look or a combination of, and whether that's if you're going to cut Mathurin's minutes, then give some of those minutes to Jarris too, and kind of split Jarris and Ben. Like use Ben on if Damien's out there, then that's where you probably see more Ben when Andrew's not out there. And then if you're going to see more Giannis minutes where Dame's not out there, maybe that's where you see Jarris more. So I don't know. They haven't, and it's because they're young. Like they've got figured out. Like Jarris, give him 2 more years. If this series is happening 2 years later, then I don't think you see Ben Shepherd at all. And I think that Jarris is a key part to this rotation along with Benedict, but I don't think the confidence is just there yet with Jarris in these playoff series, especially on the road. At home, I don't think they have much of an issue throwing him out there because it's just a totally different ball game. And the Pacers play differently. Well, I mean, we've seen this time and time again in the postseason. Pacers play completely different on the road than they do at home. They're fast, they're efficient at home, whereas in games on the road, they really. I would say besides the game that they went into the Garden and just stormed the Knicks, but that was because the Knicks were just pretty much depleted at that point. I feel like the Pacers have really strong. And in Boston, they were good, but I think they've got some advantages in Boston or against Boston that they don't really have against the Bucks because the Bucks are a little bit more. I don't know. I don't know if it's physical because I mean the Celtics are a good defensive team, but I don't think they're as physical as the Bucks. Whereas when the Pacers play the Bucks, it's more of a grind to try to get your offense going. Whereas the Celtics are good with their rotations, and while they've got guys that can get physical and are good defenders, they're not like real physical with you besides Jaylen Brown. So, and maybe you can talk about Derek White being that person too. But with the Bucks, I just feel like all their guys are crash heavy, physical, try to beat you up. They try to use some of their length to impact you, but it's not been that effective against the Pacers on their home court. But when the Bucks head to Pfizer, it's a totally different story, and that's what we saw, I think, in Game 3, Quarter 3, as you saw a much more physical Bucks team and a desperate team. So, what else do I have note? I lost my spot. Shep's back in the rotation, so I talked about that. And again, just to kind of close out Game 3 before we head into the Game 4 preview adjustments that can be made, I think you did see that. You did see a very desperate Bucks team. You saw a much more efficient team. 58.5% field goal percentage and 61.1% three-point percentage in the second half. Like I said, in the first half, I went into the halftime section of that game thinking that the Pacers are going to go up 3-0 in this series. And there wasn't really anything the Bucks were going to be able to do about it because they just weren't getting any kind of help. Gary Trent was hitting some shots, but it wasn't like he was unconscious yet. Like, it became to a point where in the third quarter, I felt like every time the Bucks shot a basketball, it was going to go in because the defense was so awful from the Pacers, the intensity, the lack of focus, the defensive assignments were brutal, and the double teaming of Giannis really just took the precedent over everything else, and that allowed for the Bucks just to get some really easy open looks, and most of them landed into the hands of Gary Trent Jr., who's always been kind of an annoyance for the Pacers. These guys that are role players that can put up high volumes and score in high volume typically do well against the Pacers, and I don't know why that is, but I can go across the board with like a a Jordan Poole has always caused the Pacers all kinds of issues. And I think players similar to him are very much like that as well. Donovan Mitchell, and I know he's an all-star, but that's a much different kind of comparison. But these guys that shoot high volume, that can get high volume shots up, they tend to take advantage of the Pacers for some reason. I don't know what it is. I just feel like the Pacers, maybe this is all teams, but Pacers really fall victim to some of these huge games, and sometimes it ends up being like a Gary Trent. But anyway, 39-18 in the third quarter. Pacers are outscored by 21 and outscored 70-44 in the second half. They were just it was a completely different game. It felt completely different. It felt like a tale of two games. The first quarter, the first half felt like two teams just really struggled, but the Pacers were obviously the better team, and they were going to win by 10. The second half, it just felt like the Bucks were going to get everything they could possibly ever want and hit threes, and Giannis was going to just kick, and all of a sudden, the Pacers are way out of reach, and it felt like they were headed for blowout territory. They kind of got back to it, only losing by 16, but still, that's a pretty big loss for a team that was up 10 at the half. So that's a huge turnaround, and I think something that the Pacers will take into game 4. We got to be better coming out of halftime, which the Pacers have always been a really good come out of halftime, because Carlisle is very good with his adjustments coming out of the half and at the beginning of the games. And then that'll leak into what we're going to look forward to in game 4. But I don't have confidence that the Bucks are going to continue to do what they did in the second half of this game, because I think the Pacers are going to come with more focus, more of the ability to shut down some of these role players, because I think you just got to go to what was working in game 1 and game 2. And I don't know why they changed that, or why they decided to kind of play with the rotational minutes. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Rick wanted to get Shepherd some minutes there to get him back into the flow of things, because I think he is healthy completely now. And maybe he is thinking about replacing Jarris with Ben throughout the playoffs, because that's what it's trending toward. Because Ben did have a good postseason last year. I think that was what, Rick is giving him benefit of the doubt, that, Jarris just isn't quite ready, and Ben has been there and has performed well in the last playoff series, or last playoffs. So yeah, game 4, right? So this leaks into what I was saying, is that I just don't think the Bucks will do what they did in game 3 and replicate that for game 4, because the Pacers will come in with more intensity, more focus, and they're a team that responds well. And we'll talk about the Pacers' response. But first, I want to talk about those Bucks adjustments. Winning teams don't typically make a whole ton of adjustments, especially when you get blown out like you did in the third quarter. There weren't a lot of things the Pacers were doing well enough for Doc to have to go, well, this was clearly a problem. The only things that I would say were things that he already was doing. For instance, keeping the rotations as they are, limit Brook Lopez as much as possible. You cannot play him in consistent minutes in these playoffs, especially against the Pacers. They are way too quick. I could see the Bucks playing Brook Lopez in a series against the Cavs, and he'd be way more successful, just because the Cavs are not fleet of foot with their bigs. They are much more of a slow-paced offense compared to what the Pacers can be, especially when they go to these smaller lineups with Pascal at the 5 or Obi at the 5. Even Turner causes a ton of issues with his foot speed, and Turner's not completely, or isn't one of the most complete players especially as far as speed's concerned, but he still gives Brook a lot of problems. So I think if you're Doc, you eliminate Brook as much as possible, containing Pascal as much as possible too. I feel like Pascal got everything that he wanted in game 3. It was very reminiscent of what he did in the first half against the Bucks in game 1 last year. It felt like he was just trying to carry the team through a very difficult stretch, while the Pacers and the rest of the players tried to play catch up. Except this time he had a lot of help from Aaron Nesmith. Aaron Nesmith was excellent in this game. And at the half, I thought was really going to, I thought Aaron was on this pace to score over 25 points, because he was lighting them up from 3. He was getting to the basket whenever he needed. I thought he did a really nice job of spreading the floor, giving Tyrese a lot of opportunities to get some shots up. And really, because there was so much focus on when the ball would swing to Neesmith, a lot of the defense tried to recover and didn't recover as well. And Neesmith got a lot of other people open, but a ton of missed shots. So again, I think if you're the Bucks, you try to adjust to containing Pascal just because you want to make the other players beat you from the field. You want to make Aaron Neesmith beat you from three. You want to make Andrew Nembhard an offensive option that the Pacers are having to go to because he's not the best shooter. And you want to make Tyrese finally hit buckets. So again, I just feel like the Bucks will adjust somewhat to containing Pascal. But the issue with that is it's hard to contain Pascal because he's either on, or, he's got AJ Green guarded him at times. He has had Brooke Lopez try to guard him. Bobby Portis is good defensively, but he's not somebody that's going to completely shut down Pascal. Pascal's going to get his against those guys. And the one player that could shut him down is Giannis. And people are like, well, then there you go. That's the answer. But Giannis is not going, and he said this before the series even started and before the playoffs even started, where they can't rely on Giannis to be a shutdown defender where he just completely eliminates the other team's best player, which he would often be at times would be called to do if he wasn't such a prolific and historic scorer against the Pacers, especially. I feel like Giannis would have more of a focus on defense, but because he has to do so much on the offensive end, the defensive side of it, that's kind of when he takes his breaks, which sounds weird, but he's just, he's in good shape, but he's not that kind of freak. Like he's going to wear himself out if he continues to do that. And I think that's where, if you're the Pacers, you just keep running at him just because, and he did get into some foul trouble early in this game, but I think you can get Giannis in dangerous positions if Pascal can get the ball and dribble at him, because Giannis is good defensively, but I think there are times where he oversells on something where it's maybe a pump fake. He did this too. I think it was Tyrese. It was either Tyrese or Andrew, maybe. But it was one of the guards that went flying by him and he grabbed I think it was Toppin actually, where he grabs his jersey and tries to pull him back. Like, oops, made a mistake. I feel like Giannis is good for that every once in a while because he gets tired. And when you're tired, you're not thinking through it. You're like, I'm just gonna reach out. And it's almost like a reaction to what's happening because he's tired and he's like, he got beat. So he just grabs. And it's not something the mind's really thinking through. It happens because you're like, man, I'm exhausted. So, yeah, I think if I'm the Bucks, I can't really contain Pascal if it means that Giannis is going to be on him for most of the game. So what that looks like, I don't know, but Pascal is going to keep the Pacers in these games as long as he's on the floor. I think they said this is on the broadcast. I think they said that Pascal in these 3 games is like over a plus 30 or something like that. Where when he's on the court, he is a thorn and one of the best players against this Bucks defense, and a good option for Tyrese when Tyrese is not going is to find Pascal on these pick and rolls or at the top of the key or at the elbow and let Pascal go to work on some of these defenders, because a lot of times it ends up being a smaller defender that he's finding disadvantages against. And then the last adjustment I think that I had for the Bucks, maintaining the energy from game 3 and do what you did in game 3. And that could be pretty obvious to say, but I thought the Bucks in the third quarter, that was the most life I've ever seen them have in the last 2 years that we've played them in the playoffs. That felt very much like this is our home floor. And because we're finally back in it, I feel like we can finally start to play with that intensity that I think a lot of the fans, especially Milwaukee, expected the Bucks to have in a rivalry like this. They don't like us. We don't like them. But they're just, besides their random skirmishes, there wasn't ever really an intensity. But it felt like because the Pacers weren't hitting shots, the Bucks had a lot of confidence in just absolutely getting in the face of Pacer players and defending and pushing and shoving, and it just felt like the Bucks had their way with the Pacers because they couldn't score. They couldn't figure out how to break down the defense, and everything was working as far as getting open shots in the first half, which is why I was like, even though they weren't hitting their shots, the Pacers were still getting tremendous looks from outside inside. Pacers were doing what they wanted. They just didn't hit their shots, but we're still up 10. In the third quarter, it looked like a completely different team showed up to play against them. And a lot of that, they went to more of that zone. And then when the bench unit comes in the third quarter, they really went to that zone. And then when TJ McConnell's out there, there's no threat of him shooting a shot. So last year he'd hit a couple and it kind of pulled teams out to try to defend him. But when he's not hitting his shots and he's not getting to the rim and he's, that zone keeps them at bay, that unit becomes pretty much worthless just because it there's no ball movement. It's a lot of ISO against a zone, which you don't want. And they don't really have the passer in that unit when TJ's kind of eliminated. I mean, you're looking at Ben, Pascal, Obi, Thomas Bryant at points, and Ben Shepherd. Like, those are not good passing players. And that's where I think Jarris is more effective, where if I'm looking at that from the outside in, and I know Jarris hadn't had any minutes yet, but when the Pacers started to struggle getting the ball moving, Jarris Walker is a ball mover. It's just what he is. Whether that is he takes a guy off the dribble, gets the paint, or gets to the elbow and distributes. But he also is just so quick and decisive in his passing, and his passing abilities are probably, besides Tyrese, though his passing abilities are second best on the team probably. And he just makes really good decisions. That even the little mistake that he makes here and there, 1 turnover, 2 turnovers, isn't going to kill you, I wouldn't say. But he doesn't really make those as much anymore. So it did make me wonder when they really started to go downhill, when Shepherd was down there, or when Ben, like, not trying not to find Jarris minutes, even if it was for 4 minutes, right? I think this is where maybe you do this with the rotation where you say, we're really struggling to move the basketball. We got to get Jarris in there because he's going to provide physicality defensively. He's going to make a good defensive play. He does. He typically makes one good defensive play where he knocks the ball away, or he gets a steal, blocks a shot. He's going to make more positive plays than negative plays. And in moments like that, when the ball is sticking to different things, Benedict Mathurin, TJ McConnell, Pascal, it helps to have the guy out there that's going to move the basketball. And Toppin's not going to beat you off a dribble. And, so and Ben's not going to dribble. He's not going to drive. He's going to try to shoot or pump fake you to try to get you in the air and then, take a 10 to 15 footer. There's not really a ball mover. And Shepherd's going to move the ball, but it's not like he's a tremendous passer, and it's not like he's going to beat you off the dribble and get the ball going somewhere else when he's dribbling. So Jarris adds a whole different layer, I think, that teams have to worry about. So if I'm Rick, and I think that's maybe an adjustment I make, is getting Jarris in there in those moments. But I know that was a long-winded way of talking about what the Bucks need to do, but it's because the Pacers just lacked any kind of energy, and it's because the Bucks completely wiped it out of them in the third quarter. They just felt like they were on their heels, and it just felt like there was no punch back. There wasn't going to be a punch back. They weren't hitting shots. So when the Bucks started hitting 4 to 5 threes, that lead, even though it would be like 9 or 12, that lead started to feel like it was like 25. It felt way, way far away. And they'd spot him 10 points. So it was not a good feeling. It was the first time we'd felt like this in the playoffs. And I think that the natural reaction as a fan is to overthink it and panic and start to doubt and question what this team is capable of. But I don't know. I don't know if the Bucks have that same energy, because it's only been 1 quarter really, because the fourth quarter was kind of the tail end of what they did, because the Pacers weren't great in the fourth, but at least they were somewhat close to the Bucks in that fourth quarter. As far as scoring wise, it was 26, I think, for the Pacers in the fourth and 31 for the Bucks. So it wasn't like they were getting blown out. And had they kind of kept even or at par with Milwaukee in the third, then we're talking about a much closer game, maybe even a couple point lead for the Pacers. But because that third quarter was just an atrocious display of basketball, it really impacted, I think, what happened in the fourth, and the Pacers could never get it back to where they needed to get it making competitive. But I just don't know. 1 quarter out of 12 quarters is not necessarily right. Even if you say that in the fourth quarter they played well, 2 out of 12 quarters is, if I'm a Bucks fan, I'm not really too happy about it. And I know they put up a good fight in the fourth quarter in game 2. So even then, you take that percentage, it's 3 of 12. So that's 25% of the quarters that they played, that's when the Bucks have come alive. I would not feel too confident Pacers have outmatched that energy 9 out of the 12 times, and I know it's at home, but I don't know. It's just something different about this Bucks team that I still feel like the Pacers on paper and their ability to shoot efficiently and the fact that they have home court advantage, I still feel really good about where the Pacers are right now. Pacers adjustments, finding the shooters. So finding somebody that can hit buckets. I don't know who that is or what that looks like. If that is Ben Shepherd, hits 2 threes tonight. Obi Toppin hits 2 or 3 tonight. Miles Turner hits 2 or 3 tonight. Somebody, Tyrese, like anybody. I mean, I'm calling on anybody. Somebody help, because it was a really bad night for the Pacers, especially from the 3-point line. You're talking about a 31 percentage from the 3-point line. They were 13 of 41. You hit 2 or 3, and they're sort of back in this game. 3 to 4, you are back in the game. 4 to 5, you probably win this game. So they just could not hit or open. And I'm talking, they were open. It was baffling, especially Turner. Miles never really has these bad performances, so it was really just shocking. It's like, oh my gosh, because Miles just doesn't have games like this, and he had game. He just had a horrible night from the 3-point line, 0 for 6, and when he's not hitting that, he's just not a player that you can really rely on enough to carry your offense. He doesn't pass very well. He's not really somebody that's going to take you down the post and figure it out there. He doesn't really drive the basketball. So it's, offensively, there's nothing. So it's basically 5-on-4. And then you take out the fact that Tyrese isn't hitting his shots and Drew's not going to hit a ton of threes on you. It starts to limit your options. Whereas when this team is really firing on all cylinders, Miles is hitting his shots, Tyrese is hitting his shots, Nembhard is a threat driving the basketball, Nesmith is playing as well as he's playing, and then you have Pascal. That's like a 5-headed monster. This feels very much like a 2-headed monster right now as we go into game 4. Am I concerned about Miles shooting? No, I'd be more concerned about Tyrese's shooting, just because it's, I think, at a heavier volume. And plus Tyrese is still younger. Miles, I always feel like, and I love that saying, water finds its level. They'll both figure it out. It's just Miles, I feel his game is set up for him to figure it out more, because where he shoots that shot from at the top of the arc, that's an easier shot, I think, than what Tyrese tries to create off that step back. And while he is good at that step back, that's a much more complicated shot. And Miles is always open on those top of the key or top of the arc threes that he's taking. Whereas Tyrese is usually contested pretty well. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Find somebody that can shoot the basketball, because that was really bad. That being said, stop doing you're not hitting your shots. As soon as the Pacers hit the second quarter, I was like, man, this isn't going well offensively, shooting the 3. And then by halftime, make that adjustment of like, we got to get to the rim, because we are not having a good night. So if I'm Tyrese, and this is another thing too, I think, and maybe it's because the strength isn't there, and he's not super fast. Like, he's quick, but he's not super fast where he's just going to blow right by people. But there are times where I do feel like he settles a little too much, and he's got a good floater. He's got great touch in the paint, and he's really good at getting to the rim. I think the next level is Tyrese trying to get into guys and get guys, because when they foul him, he's an 80% foul shooter. I mean, he can hit foul shots at a great level. And even when he gets in the paint around the rim, it makes the defense nervous. It stresses them out. And then that's when you get those cuts by Miles or Aaron or Andrew, or you get the Pascal where he's crashing towards the rim and you just kind of dish it under the defender to him, and he's got a nice shot, layup, or an and one opportunity because he's right near the rim. It just opens up so much when Tyrese can get to the rim. There's just times where I feel like they just settle, and he's guilty of this. I think Toppin at times can be guilty of this, but he's not the best ball handler, so I kind of understand it. And I just feel like they settle. Ben really does. Ben at times he almost beats his defender just on one move, and then he steps back into a 3 or a longer 2. I'd love to see Ben just go, you know what? I want you to think I'm going to step back, and then once I make that step back move, I'm gone, because I'm going back towards the rim. I'm going back towards the rack. And he's gotten a lot better at distributing the basketball heading towards the rim. So I think there's another level, which I think that's why you got to feel positively about the Pacers' chances in Game 4 and heading into Game 5, 6, 7, however long the series goes. I think what you've got to take positive in is the fact that Tyrese has a whole different level that he can play in. Benedict has a whole nother level. I'd even argue that Nembhard offensively from Game 3 to Game 4 has another level offensively where he can get better at getting to the rim and making those mid-range jumpers that he likes. And Obi Toppin has a whole nother level. TJ has another level. So you like all your chances of those guys being able to level up. It just did not work out that way in Game 3. Whereas I think it might be in Game 4, it might be a little bit more of a focus there. Don't let Giannis go nuclear. Again, try to keep him away from that 40 points. This game, I felt like in Game 3, they were too focused on double teaming him and early. I don't know why. If I'm the Pacers, and I get it, because if you let him get further and further towards the rim, it becomes more difficult to help defense. But the way they build that wall, they were jumping out to like the 3-point line. And when you double somebody out there, it's so easy to find that next pass. Like they were jumping him, and then all Giannis had to do was just bounce pass it to his left or right, or to the top up by the elbow, and it complete. Then after that, then Pacers are scrambling, trying to find out who's going to go guard who. And as much as you understand your assignment and who you have to go back to defend in those moments, it's still impossible to get to them and read where they're going to be. I mean, you're crashing so hard on these Giannis things where Aaron's having to kind of come up to guard someone else at the top of the arc. And it's like, dude, you're going to leave Gary Trent wide open in the corner. And there were 4, I think, in a row where he just wide open. I mean, it was like, yes, and him especially. Like, fine. If you're going to let Kuzma beat you, let Kuzma beat you, I guess. Even Dame at this point right now, he's just not got his shot back yet from being out so long. I mean, fine. But to give guys like Gary Trent or AJ Green those wide open, standing in the corner looks, those are such easy 3-pointers to hit when you're a good shooter. It becomes like a horse game out there. It becomes a shoot around because those guys are just so good at hitting threes and hitting their shots when they're wide open, when you've got the fans behind you. They're not going to miss those. And they didn't. AJ Green pulled up from about 35 feet and hit one. And it was, and it wasn't, of course, it wasn't contested very well because who shoots from 30 feet. But it was a breakdown of defense and it was an offensive rebound. There's been, there was a lot of that where the balls were tipped out and the Pacers weren't getting the 50-50 balls. So that was another thing that the Pacers, it just wasn't going well. And in the third quarter, it just blew up. And it really did show how good at times this Milwaukee team can be, especially when they're hitting their 3-pointers. All right. Last but not least, as far as adjustments, take advantage of the Giannis-less minutes. And they really never do. I don't know why. I think it's because Bobby Portis is out there and they get more defensive minded. Jericho Sims oftentimes will come back out, or I don't know. And because the bench unit for the Pacers has not been great, they just don't take advantage of the times where Giannis and Dame are off the court. But even when Dame is out there, you can take advantage of those minutes because Dame is not good defensively. So I feel like the Pacers can make an adjustment there. Score in those Giannis-less minutes. Get Pascal the ball. Get Ben the ball. Let's see what happens. Game 4 keys of the game. The Pacers always punch back after losses. Since Christmas, the Pacers are 8-0 after a 10-point loss via Mark Monteith on X. So thanks, Mark, for sharing that out. Yeah, 8-0 after a 10-point loss since Christmas. And, you go back to last year's postseason. Pacers go down 0-2 against let's start with the Bucks. So the Pacers lose game 1 and get pretty much blown out in game 1. Pacers made a nice run at the end of the game to make it at least closer, but they really did get run off the floor in that first half in game 1 last year. Game 2, they came back and stole it. And then that started the series because the away team won on the road. And so the Pacers caused the Bucks a lot of issues there. Then you head over to the Knicks series last year. Pacers go down 0-2. They go back home. They take care of business on home floor. It's a 2-2, right? And so they responded. to that 0-2 start with a 2-2, go even. And then the Pacers go to Madison Square Garden and get a win, a massive win on the road. So, and in that series, right, the Pacers, they go down 3-2, they respond, then they go into game 7 and win it. So it just, the Pacers have always had a response, and people are like, well, what about the Celtics series? But I would even say then, like, the Pacers in those games had responses for a Boston punch, and that Boston team was very good, obviously. Title winners, Boston. Very good team. And the Pacers were blow to blow with them in every single one of those games. So they've got fight. When the Pacers are kicked, they usually kick back harder. So I'm excited to see what this team is made of. What's the difference from this year to last? Are they the same team? Can they fight back? Maybe this isn't the same team because last year's team would have fought back at this point. We'll see what happens in game 4. I'm nervous about game 4 just because I didn't like the way the bench played, and I didn't like the lack of intensity and focus when you had a chance. Pacers go up 3-0. The Bucks are dead in water. They're gone. Like, they would have either folded up in game 4 or got smacked in game 5 in Cambridge. So I'm just, the Pacers this postseason, I think their goals are a lot different, right? It was always going to be steal one in Milwaukee. It would have been nice to sweep them, but I don't think anybody had that on their bingo card of the Pacers sweeping them. So now what the Pacers need to do is steal game 4 and head back to Cambridge to deliver the knockout blow. And even then, I'm nervous because the Pacers tend to, and I think some of that was in this game too, and the immaturity will allow this to happen while they're still a maturing team. When you have a 10-point lead, you feel pretty good because you're like, oh, we were hitting shots. We start to hit shots, we're going to win this game easily. I think that kind of seeps into what you're thinking. And there's just been times where this Pacer team has allowed things like that to happen, where that wasn't shocking what happened in game 3. We've seen that before. You would think that as time goes on, they'll get better at that. And I think they will. And then I think that you're going to see the emergence of different players that are good in those moments. I think Tyrese is obviously going to get better in those moments. But I think, this is Ben's first playoff run. This is what's wild, is because he was out injured last year. He's still got a lot of learning to do. Nemhard's got a lot of learning to do. Aaron Nesmith has a lot of learning to do. So these younger guys, Ben Shepherd, you've got Jarris Walker. Even Obi Toppin is not too experienced in the playoffs. So you've got all these guys trying to figure out, what does this look like? How do we close games out? How do we close teams out? And that's something that youth can really affect, because you just don't know how to think about these games and how to go about taking care of business. Whereas Pascal's been here and he tried to deliver the knockout punch. He just couldn't get enough support around him. So get Ty going. Yeah. If you look at his numbers, we just mentioned this, his numbers in the series are not great, especially shooting the basketball. I would say that his numbers are really good creating for different players. But listen to these numbers. In the 3 games that they played, he's averaged 15 points per game, which if you looked at that and he had not been taking as many shots as he has, you'd be like, okay, that's fine. Like Tyrese is 15, like as long as other people. And then you read the other ones, they're 25 for Pascal, 13 for Aaron or Andrew. And then you got 13 for Miles, 13 for Aaron, 12 for Ben. Like, those are good numbers. You'd be like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, that's pretty solid. But the fact is that he's shooting the ball at a higher volume and he's not hitting them. So this should be more of 18 to 20. And when the Pacers can get Tyrese Haliburton scoring, and when Ty scores 20 plus points in a game, they're 20-3 this season, which will indicate to you right there is when Tyrese has his shot going, people tend to try to go out and guard him and get in his face. And then that's when he creates complete breakdowns from the other teams because they're so worried about him scoring and hitting the threes and hitting his shots and getting everything that he wants offensively. They try to, show other people, show other things, show 2 more people towards him, double team him. Like, it just, I just feel like he creates such chaos. But because he's only shooting 37% from the field, he's shooting on average 5 of 14 from the field in these games. He's only shooting 26% from three. And the game 1 and game 2, he had a lot of them go in and out. Game 1 and game 2, I felt like he wasn't really struggling shooting wise. It was more of just not getting good luck. Like a lot of those were, and that sounds funny, but there were a lot of them that rimmed out that I felt like, dang, if he just had that, it'd be better. But now that it's gone 3 games, it's in this game especially, really struggled to shoot the basketball. In this game 3, he was 5 of 11, so he was 45%, which is better, I think, as far as numbers are concerned. But he just doesn't look very confident, and he doesn't look confident enough to take his shots. And we need him to take more shots just because you shoot more. What did he say? Shoot more, ball go in more. He was not wrong, and he is shooting more, and he's second in field goal attempts on the team. But I mean, maybe we don't want him shooting more if he's going to shoot at a 43% clip or something like that. But he's got to shoot better. He's close to 47, usually 48, where that's where he needs to be. I mean, he's that good of a shooter. And I laugh when people say he's not a good shooter. He's a good shooter. He just, I think times, and as a good point guard like him and what he does he oftentimes will share the basketball more than shoot the basketball. But there are times where you get frustrated because you're like, take more. But we'll see what happens. What else? We went over Tyrese. Go back to what worked in game 1 and game 2. Yeah, like I said, stop trying to double team Giannis so much. We did it at times and it works at times. And, I think, but there were so many problems with the fact that they were trying to double team him so far up when he'd get across the half court line and you already start to see the person that's going to come double him start to head towards him because they want to stop him from running downhill. At this point, go back to double teaming around the elbow, around the free throw line, double team him there. And if he hits guys in the corner, then so be it. But let him get deeper, let him get to the rim, challenge him. I mean, I know this team becomes very difficult when they're scoring 40 plus, but I also think that the way that the Pacers are playing him, they almost have to let him and Pascal go one-on-one and help where you can. But there were a lot of show towards him and a lot of moments where it looked like he was going to be doubled, but then you just kind of back off of him and let him kind of do what he wants. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like they double team him too much at times, and it gets him a lot of trouble, especially with really good shooters on the perimeter. You almost want to say, all right, well, try to get yours then, I guess. Try to go over me one-on-one with Pascal. And Pascal's kept him, and that wall's kept him at 35 before. We can do it again. I just felt like this game we were so trying to, there's so much focus on trying to get the ball out of his hands earlier, which I think it actually helps when Giannis tries to go deeper into the shot clock with it by himself and then tries to figure it out, because that's when he starts to make those mistakes. Whereas you rush him early, it's 20 seconds, you're 4 seconds in the shot clock, and by the time that happens, he's already moved the ball and it's already into a corner 3 by the 16th. I mean, that becomes where the Bucks are playing at a higher pace. So yeah, I don't know what the thought there was. I didn't know if they were trying to speed the Bucks up because it helps the Pacers, and they thought maybe that could speed them up because you're going to get more missed shots. But the Bucks weren't missing shots, and when they were making shots, and the Pacers can't get out and run, and when the Pacers can't get out and run, that's more difficult for them to create any offense because they are a run and gun team. The Pacers just don't have that ability to constantly go half court all the time, and that's what they ended up doing in that third quarter. And it just got really tough for the Pacers to try to break down that defense when they were in the half court. That led into the continued pace. So we'll skip that one. Hit your shots. Yeah, tons of good looks. Again, they are the second best team in field goal percentage in the playoffs. The Pacers are at 47.9. Cavs are the only team shooting better at 50%. The Pacers just got to hit their shots. And there's not really adjustments you make there. That's just hit your shots. Make them. You make them all year. I think that, I don't think this poor of a game will happen again. I hope, knock on wood, like in this series. I don't think the Pacers are going to shoot this poorly again. So I feel confident there. Hang on to the ball. 8 turnovers in game 1, 8 turnovers in game 2, 14 in game 3. The Pacers have always been very good about holding on to the basketball. However, that being said, they have been really bad at in the postseason, especially away from home. they tend to be right around this 13 to 14. I know it's harder to play your best at on the home or on the away court, and you do tend to turn the ball over more, especially as a younger team on the road than at home. You can take care of the basketball better at home because of communication and different things like that, pressure. But I mean, that's a pretty significant turnover margin between games. 14, that's a lot of turnovers. Got to do better with the basketball. Keep that under 10. And again, you get 4 more possessions. And with usually how good the Pacers offense is and how efficiently they score and at a high percentage they shoot, they typically will get 6 to 8 points off of those 4 extra possessions. And you're right back into it, even though you're having one of the worst performances as far as shooting the basketball. So again, there were so many things that I felt like the Pacers could have done and make this a closer game at least. And I think you feel pretty good about that as a Pacer fan, just because I don't think you have a quarter like they did in the third where they just blow up everything and they look awful on the offensive end and only score, 19 points. So 18 points in the third. But I think that's where the Pacers can make their adjustments. Now, looking at predictions, I'm going to make 5 predictions for game 4. And this is at Pfizer Forum. Milwaukee is hosting, looking to get it back to 2-2. If it goes 2-2, then it's now a best-of-3 series with 2 games at home for the Pacers, which I still feel pretty good about. But I really want them to put this series to bed, and they very well could do that in Game 5 if they win one tonight here in Milwaukee. I love the people that are saying Bucks and 6. That's a lot of confidence that the Bucks can go. And, you do have 2 games at Pfizer Forum if you win the next 3. Or if you only play 3 more games, 2 of these are going to be at Pfizer. But I just don't have confidence the Buck team can beat the Pacers at home when the Pacers are at home. So, predictions. Number 1 prediction, Gary Trent will not have 37 and Bobby Portis will not have 28. Water always finds its level. There's my saying again that I love so much. Bobby averaged 13.9 points per game or in the regular season, and then Gary Trent averaged 11.1 points per game in the regular season. They do end up usually playing better. You get more intensity. You get more confidence when you're playing at home, especially in the playoffs. And maybe you do get 3 or 4 more points typically off of your average. But even if the Pacers keep Gary Trent at 20 points and everybody else kind of does what they did in game 3, or maybe you do that to Bobby where you keep him and, Gary Trent's at right around 12 and Bobby only scores 20, 25, like, you're doing a much better job of keeping those role players at bay. And then you get Giannis's 35 points or whatever it is. All those things are so key. But eventually, Gary Trent is going to miss shots. Bobby Portis Jr. is going to miss shots. Gary could go for 20. He's really, probably feeling the good off of the game 3 performance. Maybe it's 25. But you also have to remember when he's taking more shots away from a guy like Damian Lillard, Giannis. So you live with it. If he gets 18 to 20, he's also taking those possessions. And because he's feeling good about where he is shooting and offensively, Gary Trent could have one of those games where he shoots himself out of the game or shoots the Bucks out of the game. Bobby shoots the Bucks out of the game. So those things can happen, especially with role players. And that's why role players are role players. It's because they typically don't find consistency scoring at a very high clip and being able to string those together, especially over a playoff series. Because, again, you find a way. Tyrese will have his best game of the playoffs. So far, he'll have a 20-plus point game tonight. And again, when the Pacers do that, 20-3 this season. Miles will hit 3 threes tonight. I'm banking on the big fella taking his shots because he doesn't typically shy away. Even when he's struggling, he will continue to shoot them. I still think Miles has a game here where we're like, all right, got Miles back shooting good. That's a good sign for the Pacers. I think this is the one. I think he typically responds pretty well after not having a good game. He and Tyrese are good at that responding. So I think Miles does that. And Miles is a veteran. Miles 0 for 6 is not going to infect his ability to knock down threes like it will with some of these other guys. Pascal is going to have a double-double. I'm thinking more of like the 20 points, 11 boards kind of thing. I think he does get a double-double here just because Brook Lopez won't be out there as much, and it's easier to rebound when he's not out there, obviously. And I think the Pacers will win game 4. I feel good. There's going to be a laser focus for this Pacer team. Having guys like Aaron Neesmith and Andrew Nembhard and Pascal Siakam and Tyrese Haliburton, Miles Turner, they don't like to get punched. And you've seen them fight physically, air quotations for those on the audio version, where they stand up for themselves. They don't let teams punch at them and then they don't give a punch back. They will always find a way to throw back at somebody. And I feel really good about that. Honestly, I feel better about that than I feel about them if they were to go in this next game 5, closing it out in game 5. I don't know why that is. I think because the Pacers tend to let up on the gas too soon. They have that tendency because they're younger. But younger guys, when they get embarrassed, typically try to punch, right? They get into this fight or flight. And the Pacers last season in the playoffs were very much fight. I think you've got that same team. While the performances aren't the same from like guys like TJ McConnell or Obi Toppin or, guys like Tyrese, I still think there's that next level they've not hit yet. And this feels like a good game in which this could happen because they're so fired up. There's so much intensity and they know the importance of getting this back home with 3-1 lead and giving yourself a cushion, because then the Bucks really do have to win 3 straight to try to get the Pacers out. So we knew this going in. We knew game 3 was going to be their heaviest punch. Honestly, when they went down 10, I was like, man, was that it? That was their punch? Like, is that all we're going to get? Surely not. And they didn't. They threw it hard in quarter 3, ended up winning the game. But I just have more confidence that the Pacers are going to be more focused, laser focused. They lost some focus there in that quarter, but you never want a wounded dog is very dangerous when you back him into a corner. And I think that's what the Pacers are. They've got a bunch of dogs on this roster and they do not like to be backed into corners, and they will continue to fight. So I'm looking forward to game 4. Man, can't get the game straight today. Looking forward to game 4 and what the Pacers have as far as that's concerned. I don't really have a score prediction just because it's hard to do score predictions, especially when you're on the road, because you just don't know how close this game will be. I do think it'll be a close game. I think it'll be probably the closest game we might see wire to wire. I just feel like this could be, this could be the closest game in the series because of the intensity of both teams. The Bucks know how important it is to stay level and to keep in the series, because when you go down 3-1, I think the percentages are 90% again for the Pacers to go up and win this series, especially going back home. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Pacers Bucks tonight at 9:30 Eastern time. If you listen this far, I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to covering this series as it continues on, and game 5 will be Tuesday. We'll be back maybe Tuesday night to record after the game, depending on when it ends and how I feel, or we'll be back on Wednesday to record the recap to this game. It'll probably be Tuesday night that I record, though, just because of the scheduling and things like that. So I'm looking forward to watching game 4 tonight, again, 9:30 Eastern time on TNT. And if you've liked this content, you can go over to YouTube. You can see the visuals of it. I've got the rundown on the screen, and you can see my face if you so wish. But we do a YouTube video, and we do the audio version of the podcast. And yeah, we're on YouTube. We are the Pacers Fever Show. Over there, you can find us, the Pacers Fever Show, around your social media outlets. X, we're on X, we're on Facebook, Instagram. I haven't done TikTok, but we will eventually start to do TikToks as we get further and further into this podcast. I don't know if it'll be this season, but it'll definitely be next season. And then we're going to cover the Indiana Fever. I know it's kind of weird because it's like coinciding with the WNBA. I think they had their first preseason practice today. The Fever did, but we'll be covering the Fever as well on this show. So if you were looking forward to that, or you're looking forward to Pacer basketball next season, we'll be covering the Fever season as well. So make sure to subscribe, follow where you get your podcasts. We're anywhere that you can find your podcast, Spotify, Apple, anywhere that you can find us. We are able to be heard, I guess. I don't know what to say, but thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. Leave your comments below. What do you think happens in game 4? You think Pacers go up 3-1, or do you think the Bucks level the series and we head back to Gamebridge for what starts a 3-game set to decide who moves on to play? I'm just going to say the Cleveland Cavaliers. So that being said, thanks Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We will see you next time. And let's go Pacers. Let's do it. Let's take game 4.